I'm going to be talking about the efficacy of a PEDV vaccine that we've given to sows and evaluated that with a piglet challenge. So last year I came and spoke with you about our conditional license. And as you know, we have a PED conditionally licensed vaccine that is an inactivated whole virus vaccine, and it is adjuvanted, similar to the majority of inactivated vaccines. The requirements for the conditional license, as I mentioned last year, are these 4 bullet points here. And for our reasonable expectation of efficacy, what we did was vaccinated sows and looked at FFN, or neutralizing antibody responses in those sows, as well as transfer of those antibodies into piglets. We also did a full safety evaluation within the target population, and that's done across geographic sites, both to account for management practices as well as genetic differences in sows and gilts. Additionally, we do purity testing to make sure that only that PEDV antigen and adjuvant and those normal vaccine components are within that vaccine and that there are no extraneous agents. And along with that, there's a commitment to perform efficacy and potency testing, and that is for the full license. And so I'm going to be talking about our efficacy study for our PEDV vaccine. So as we know, pigs are most susceptible to PED immediately following birth. So neonates are the most susceptible to both infection and disease. And unfortunately, when we talk about disease due to PED, we're talking about mortality. And in naive farms, of course, we can see mortality from 80%, 100% of farms. And while we do have some very robust control measures that have been put in place, unfortunately, PED has become endemic on some farms. And while the incidence of PED has definitely decreased, there is still a risk of outbreaks, especially in some pig-dense areas. Therefore, to reduce mortality due to PED, it's key to protect piglets immediately following birth. And so our objective of the study that I'm going to share with you was to evaluate the efficacy of the PED vaccine when administered to pregnant sows, followed by a virulent challenge in neonatal pigs. Here is our study design. So we have 2 groups of sows. Our TO1 group is an adjuvant placebo only, and the TO2 group of sows is given the PEDV vaccine. We have 10 sows in those litters within this study, and each of these groups of sows was given a 2 ml dose intramuscularly at 5 and 2 weeks pre-farrowing. Piglets are challenged when all of the piglets per litter are between 1 and 12 hours of age. So this is the first day of birth, or the only day of birth, right? And then the study is concluded 7 days after piglet challenge. So when piglets are 7 days of age is when the study was concluded. We did source our sows from a farm that was free of PED and allotted sows to treatment groups based on a completely randomized design. And importantly, we did have sows in both treatments housed in rooms. So we had adjuvant placebo sows as well as our vaccinate sows housed together. For sows, we looked at PED qPCR in feces as well as FFN titers in serum. And this was during the vaccination phase, both to confirm that our sows were negative to PED at initiation of the study, to confirm that our TO1 sows were maintained at PED negative status, and then also to kind of mimic the conditions of our reasonable expectation of efficacy study, to look at FFN titers post-vaccination. In piglets, our primary variable, or our key endpoint, was mortality. And we attributed mortality due to PED unless there was overwhelming evidence that piglets did not die to PED. So even in the case of a pig that was laid on, for example. It's not clear if that piglet had died due to PED and then was immediately laid on, or if that piglet was sick and immobile due to PED and then was laid on. So those deaths were also attributed to PED. At necropsy, we also measured gastroenteritis scores as well as took a fecal sample for PED PCR. So looking at our results, these data are the Sow Serology. And I'm only showing our Sow Serology on day 28, which is 7 days post second vaccination. But we did confirm that at the time of our vaccination, all of the sows were PED naive. So we didn't have any FFN antibody titers, and there was no PED shedding in feces. Similarly, our TO1 sows maintained our PED negative status during the vaccination phase, and the TO2 sows did have an FFN response following vaccination. And you can see from this graph down here at the bottom of the screen, this is showing the data just in a different format. So the orange bar is our adjuvant group, and the yellow bar is our PEDV vaccinate group. And so we can see that similarly to our expectation of efficacy study, we do have a significant increase in FFN antibody titers induced by vaccination in sows. So turning to litter mortality, our TO1 group, actually all of the piglets, 100% of them succumbed to mortality due to PED. And this is expected, unfortunately. In our TO2 group, which is our vaccinate group, we had 40% mortality or 60% survival. We do have a mitigated fraction of 0.7, and so what this means is that vaccination mitigated mortality about 70% of the time. And these differences between TO1 and TO2 are statistically significant. So again, we're looking at the same data in a different format, so in the graph. Again, that orange bar is looking at the adjuvant placebo, and the yellow bar is looking at our experimental PED vaccine. You can see that these are statistically different. And of the 10 TO1 litters, we didn't have any piglets that completed the study. The majority of these piglets succumbed to PED mortality about day 2 or 3 post-challenge, and all pigs were removed by day 5. Of our TO2 litters, we had 7 litters that had piglets that completed the study. So moving to shedding in piglets. So shedding here is described in terms of copy number per 5 microliters of feces. And this is a mean of piglet per group. So in our TO1 group, we have 94 piglets. And on average, they shed about 8 times 10 to the 5th copies of PED per 5 microliters of feces. And in TO2, of our 78 piglets, on average, they shed about 2.7 times 10 to the 4 copies per 5 microliters of feces. Only within our TO2 group did we have piglets that did not shed PED at all. And you can see again from the graph, just showing the data in a different way, that this amount of shedding is statistically different. Okay, so moving on to conclusions. So vaccination resulted in PED FFN responses in sows, and this mimics what we saw for our expectation of efficacy study. But not only that, within this challenge experiment, we showed that vaccination did result in significantly less mortality of piglets that are challenged at the day of age, and significantly less shedding of PED within feces in vaccinate litters. So under the conditions of this study, the experimental vaccine, our conditionally licensed product, is efficacious. So this vaccine can be used as a tool to help reduce neonatal mortality.